Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Pacers Daily. I am your host, Hery Acosta. We have a lot to talk about. No big moves recently from the Pacers other than the James Wiseman and the J Huff signings and trade, which I've already covered in the last few episodes. But today we're just going to talk about just some things to look forward to for this season. Pacers fans, after losing Game 7, losing Tyrese Halliburton for the season, didn't really look like there was too much to root for. But as of right now, I personally think there's a lot to look forward to. It all starts with the fact that the Pacers are going to continue to have a deep rotation. Our bench is still going to be one of the best in the league. Haven't really lost any. We haven't lost really anyone on our bench. Obviously, we lost Miles Turner in the starting lineup, but when we actually talk about full-on rotation and just what kind of players we have on the bench, pretty much still the same team. I mean, we just signed J Huff and James Wiseman, which Huff or Wiseman could actually end up being a starter at one point, but at the moment they are most likely going to end up being backups at least to start the season. We kept Tony Bradley. We have Obi Toppin under contract. We have McConnell under contract. Obviously, Matherin's most likely going to end up being a starter next season. But just a lot of good players. Johnny Furphy, Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, all entering their second or their third year, are just going to keep improving. Walker gets more minutes. He's a very good player when he does get the minutes. Obviously, he is in and out of rotations at times, but Pacers do still have one of the deepest rosters in the league, and it's going to be very entertaining to keep watching that. And so that kind of leads me to really talking about how a lot of our players are destined for breakout seasons. The one I really want to look into is Bennedict Mathurin, just because he's a guy that can get you 25 to 30 points off the bench on any given night if he's really shooting lights out the way he does sometimes. Now, it's not all about his scoring, all about his shooting. He's a guy that drives into the lane, gets free throws, gets fouled, and it's just a guy that in a starting lineup without Halliburton, he could be the go-to scorer outside of Siakam. Now, we could see him putting up 20 to 25 points a game this year in like an absolute crazy breakout season, maybe even good enough for a most improved player kind of season for Mathurin. Now, this could also be a big season for Nembhard and Nesmith. Now, Nembhard and Nesmith tend to be in between 10 to 15 points a game. Now, obviously, they can step it up a little bit. I still think Nesmith will be around that just because most of Nesmith's game is on the defensive end. Same with Nembhard, but Nembhard also gets into his scoring ways. He's a guy that can create his own shot in the mid-range, likes to drive. He likes to get into big defenders. So that would be an interesting one to look at. Obviously, players like McConnell and Toppin, they had some of their best seasons last year. Toppin had his best statistical season. Just more and more players that can break out at any point. I would really like to see a Jarris Walker breakout season just because I originally thought that year 2 he was going to hit a crazy big improvement just because I had a feeling that he was going to be more involved in the offense, but that never really happened. He kind of started falling out of the rotation. Now, he had some decent games, but he was hurt at the end of the playoffs, didn't even play in the finals. Would have been interesting to see what a player like him could have done. But it just keeps on adding on. We have a very young team. We don't really have players you would call like very seasoned veterans. Obviously, McConnell and James Johnson and Siakam are really our longest tenured. Not like with the Pacers, but have played the most seasons in the NBA. They've been around for a while. But, we have a bunch of players that were drafted from 2020 and closer to now. Obviously, you have Halliburton, Toppin, Wiseman, and Nesmith all from 2020. You got Nembhard and Mathurin from 2022. You got Shep and Walker from 23. Furphy and Enrique Freeman from 24. Bradley was drafted all the way back in 2017, but he's still very young. Isaiah Jackson was drafted very recently as well. So the Pacers just have a very young roster that they've gotten not just throughout the draft, but through trades. Just a lot of lottery players or a little bit later that just didn't pan out with their teams, or just, obviously being the team that drafted all these players like Nembhard and Mathurin, Walker, Furphy, all drafted by the Pacers. But it is very nice to know that the Pacers still have a very young team. They're not really relying on too many veterans. This is the kind of season that you want to see young guys blossom, and you really want to see what they can do in not just training camp, but really just kind of how to start the season, whether they are playing very good or they're struggling to kind of get a hold on things. So that's going to be very interesting to look at. But this is what I kind of wanted to talk about just because I saw some stuff on social media. I saw a post, it was a story that Benedict Mathurin posted of him dunking on Miles Turner. Now, I don't know if that was a legitimate shot at the Bucks and Miles Turner, or if that was just a joke, kind of as like a goodbye post. But something tells me that the Pacers-Bucks rivalry is going to intensify more in 2025 than ever, and this is with Halliburton being out. Now, Halliburton's going to talk trash on the bench. I mean, Lillard did it when he was out with that calf blood clot before he tore his Achilles as well. But we all know how the Bucks and Pacers series has been. We know that the Pacers have had the Bucks number for the past 2 years. This year in the regular season was a little different. Pacers were still struggling when they actually played the Bucks. Playoffs came along. Pacers gentlemen swept them out of the playoffs. And it's just, I'm saying just because of the fact that the homegrown kid, Miles Turner, decided to sign with the rivals, just because they offered a little bit more money than the Pacers did at first. Now, if all that's true about his agent not giving the Pacers a chance to match that offer or anything, that's also going to kind of solidify into the beef, into the big rivalry. So I'm really looking forward to the Pacers-Bucks in 2025. Now, obviously, we're going to be missing our star player. They're going to have a fully healthy Giannis, but they're not going to have that second star. Now, at the moment, it looks like Miles Turner might be their second best player in 2025 because they just released Lillard and he was already not going to play. So their lineup is looking, they got Kevin Porter Jr., who's most likely going to start at their point guard. Either Gary Trent or Gary Harris will play at shooting guard. They just got rid of Pat Connaughton, so he's not going to be on the roster. So Taurean Prince might start a small forward. And then you got, obviously, Giannis and Turner at the 4 and the 5 with Bobby Portis as a 6-man. That's a pretty decent lineup. It's not as good of a lineup as the Bucks have had over the last few years, but it's still a pretty decent lineup. And obviously the Pacers will most likely go Nembhard, Mathurin, Nesmith, Siakam, and either Isaiah Jackson or Jay Huff to start the season. But I'm just really looking forward to how all these things plan out. Hopefully more and more news start coming out on free agency. Pacers make a move or something. This is what you were here. Everything that happens. But as always, I'm your host, Hery Acosta. This is Pacers Daily. Boom, baby, and go